now it is. So I just want to repeat because I like the idea that textile and fashion is somehow the glue which unite people, and we can see that in progress.
Yep.
So I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Turney, who's Professor of Fashion and Textiles at Winchester School of Art, University of Southampton. Her research focuses on the everyday, the practice at which the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and how these frequently hidden moments can be catalysts for social change. This concerns Europe. Informed her publications. She's the founder and editor of Clothing Cultures, sits on the editorial board of Textile, the Journal of Clothes and Culture, and is a member of the advisory board of the Dress and Borders Association, and also of Cultures of Knitting, obviously, which is translated into Russian, and she likes crime fiction.
And her cat. Were you aware that, just a second, I'm trying just to
talk through the microphone. Are you aware that you have this on your bio? That she likes crime fiction and her cat?
Well, that's true.
Yeah, I know. Okay,
thank you so much for inviting me. It's delightful to be here. Thank you to the organisers. Also, it's really lovely.
You need to speak into the microphone.
Yeah, you need to speak into the microphone. Because I'm very short, I think I need a cushion. Okay. There we go. Okay, much like many of my colleagues here today, my career started as a design historian teaching, I suppose, critical studies to fashion students, which I've done for 25 years. But over the last few years, I've been teaching fashion practice, which is a little bit of a change, I suppose, for many people. So today this is a little bit of an ad-lib, but I want to introduce you to some projects that my undergraduate students have been doing, not just with myself, but with other people, and why we've started to teach in a different way, and why suddenly I'm involved in these kinds of things. My background is design history, but I also work with material culture and archaeology, and my specialism is really wardrobe studies. So we've started to teach wardrobe studies as part of the curriculum. I'm going to whiz through some of these slides, so I apologise for this because I want us to get to the good stuff, which is the student work. Yeah. Fabulous. Feel like life and memory. Okay. So during the pandemic, we started to rethink the fashion programme, particularly in response to the fashion industry, which we were all quite worried about in general, but also the proclamations that they were going to make change, which obviously they did not. So we thought we had to kind of start doing some things on a local level that perhaps we couldn't have done or couldn't do as much as other big institutions might do. We're a very small institution, or part of a massive university, but the arts was quite small. You'll be very familiar with these three slides, today.
I will help you.
Okay, so this is good. So one of the things that we've been doing for a long time is teaching students about sustainability and sustainable narratives. We've been talking about fabrics, we've been talking about the fashion industry, we've been talking about ethics, environmentalism, and a whole variety of things. But what we found when it came to fashion students' practice was that those ideas were merely academic. They saw this as something they really cared about, they were passionate about, and it wasn't feeding through into their practice. So also, along with that, we had spent a lot of time, unfortunately, ruining them in lots of ways, because we kept saying things like, this is your opportunity to make a change. You have this opportunity, you could do this, you could change these things. And it was a bit overwhelming for people. And of course, for very young people who are a bit naive, I guess it is an enormous problem. As an older person, I find it very worrying myself. So I think for young people, it became very difficult for them to see the relationship between what we were teaching them and how they were living their lives and how they were creating their designs. And we started to think, how can we actually address this? And we started.
I will help you.
Thank you. What do you do?
It's Joe.
Yeah.
The other button. It's the one you think isn't going forward.
Okay. Oh, well, stay on this one for a moment. It's the backwards button.
It's the back button.
Exactly. Of course it is. Okay. Right. So what we do as an art school is one of the things that we're very, very keen on is that we research through practice. Everything we do is about learning through doing, and we're very keen on skills and skill-based knowledge. As you can see here, there are some people doing work here, skill-based work, just in case you didn't know what that was. And we have lots of people who come in and talk about work. What we started to do is start thinking about what we cared about, what we could do, what our history was, what our heritage was, where we were based, and what we could deliver to students, but also how students could start to think for themselves without us continuously teaching them and preaching to them. So this is my background. These are the things that I care about. It doesn't mean that I don't care about the other things. It's just that we have to have kind of things that pivot us. And I'm very interested in the way people consume goods, not just in terms of purchase, but what they do with goods once they've bought them. I care about how people care for things, how they use them, how they don't use them. And that became the starting point for a lot of the work that we do. Other members of staff have other passions, particularly about things like choice. Why have we given people too much choice when actually they could work within different kinds of boundaries? And we started to do these kinds of things too. It works. Okay. So what we really wanted to do was to start encouraging people to think that education was a real life practice. Making and doing was also part of that everyday practice, and how could those things be developed in a pedagogic sense? So we started to look at Amy Twigger-Holroyd's fashion narratives, where we started to encourage students to think about just one element of the discussions we've been having about sustainability, and think about themselves in that position and what they could do to make a difference. How would the world change if that one issue was solved? And we started to get them to think about those things, so it became something to do with both education and also their own discussion and their own involvement in the practice. So it wasn't me telling them how to think or what to do or what to wear or what to buy. They actually made their own decisions. Likewise, we started to do wardrobe studies, which is something that can be rolled out to everyone. And in fact, we have now started to develop this project and rolled it out into Hampshire schools as well. So we've started to kind of develop this kind of outreach program with this as well, and I'll talk to you very briefly about what was involved. We also started to think about zero waste, but also reuse, remake, repair. These are the things that really drive what we do. We also stopped working so much with industry and started working more with charities and charitable organisations and local community groups as well. So we started to change our focus with who we worked with as well. So we started to think about how we could work for a common good, essentially. So wardrobe studies is my project, so obviously I'm really excited about it. And one of the issues was that students were saying, oh yes, how can we be sustainable? We're incredibly sustainable. So I asked students to count everything in their wardrobe, absolutely everything, and write down what they have. One skirt blue, one skirt black, one skirt pink, 85 black t-shirts, all of these things that people have in their wardrobes, and they would come away and say, I didn't know I had so much stuff. The next thing we asked them to do is to take a photograph of themselves wearing their clothes for the week and make a chart of what clothes they wear and what clothes they don't wear. They tend to wear the same thing all the time. No surprises there. But ultimately, people making up these decisions for themselves, they're saying, I didn't know I did that, I didn't know that. Also, we then ask them to say, okay, could you style your wardrobe in a different way? And we get them to do a fashion shoot. We give them all of the accoutrements that a fashion course will allow, so that's a photographer, backgrounds, all of those kinds of things, and they restyle themselves. And as a result of that project, students have developed a real sense of self-esteem, that they don't need to look a particular way, they can be creative, they can see themselves in a different way, because they have to model the clothes themselves. And finally, we ask them to do a remake project. The item of clothing that they don't wear, or they use least, or like least, we ask them to restyle and make into something else. And this gives them the opportunity to see that there's potential in the things that they have for both restyling, but also reusing. So here's an example of a remade jacket from wardrobe. So So people have this. Now the next project is a really cool project, which is a remake project in general. One of the issues that we have with fashion students is that they have so much potential, so many opportunities, and we encourage them to think outside of the box, and actually that's too much for them. So instead of that, instead of getting them to be kind of weird or mad or any of those things, we ask them to remake things. We have a project with the Salvation Army, which is a charitable organisation which deals predominantly with the homeless, and this becomes increasingly important as the discussion goes on. The Salvation Army are given lots and lots of donations of different kinds of clothing, but largely they're given overcoats and bed linen and blankets that they can't use for a variety of different reasons. Our students use those garments to remake them into something else. Sometimes they make things out of curtains and overcoats, sometimes they make things out of blankets. They make a whole variety of different things out of those odd and strange materials. The whole point here is to say that there's a lot of stuff that we have and we can't use, and we can't recycle, and we can't dispose of in any way. Even things that are donated and can't be used for very underprivileged groups still need a different kind of home. It encourages people to think differently about. Okay, so this is one of the projects. Here's another one where people are just using their kind of fashion skills to remake curtains into jackets. Here we are. You can see that this is a curtain and a blanket being made into a dressing jacket. And this is a reproduction or a remaking of a greatcoat into a cape. Okay. And the second part of the project is to redo and reuse different kinds of materials, which you can see here. Okay. Now what happens is, at the end of this project, the students put on a fashion show using these garments in themselves. They sell these garments in a pop-up shop in the city centre. The public can buy them, and it raises lots of money for the Salvation Army. I wonder, could we have a film? There's a very small film, which is better than me talking. That will demonstrate this.
Ultimately, that was an advert for the Salvation Army. It's not something that we made. And I think that there were some problems in some of their narrative. However, I think what it does do is it gives people the opportunity to rethink what they already have and perhaps reware, restart or remake things that they have. And finally, where I work in Winchester was the home of the first Burberry factory. And this is important because it ties into a lot of the work we do with homelessness in the area, not just in the department I work, but across the whole school. And one of the things that we do is we get a lot of dead stock from Burberry, so our students do a project called Reinvention. And what we did was we not only did this Burberry project where we used extra fabric, is we put on an exhibition about the city and the role of Burberry in the city, but also drew attention to the fact that now Winchester is now a history and heritage centre, and the old Burberry factory is now a homeless night shelter, which talks about the way in which we understand the city, but also the way in which money and commerce and a whole variety of things have circulated. And what this did was it encouraged people from the local community to come in and talk about their experiences of old Winchester, but also to consider the way in which industry and indeed culture had kind of reframed the city in general. And this is particularly important for us as we're expanding at the moment into the city, and it's obviously a good opportunity to engage with other people on that level. Okay. And here's some examples of that project. Okay. So finally, I'm sure I've gone on for too long, but finally, how can we eat the elephant? There are so many things that we could talk about, so many things that we could do. This is only a really recent start for us in trying to link theory and practice into fashion education. I'm sure other people do very, very different things, but this kind of at the moment is working for us. There's obviously plans to do even better things. So ultimately, if this is something that you would want to do, from my own experience, do what you know. Share your passion, share your experiences, but also make sure that you engage others. The key to spreading this message is to make people, or encourage people to make up their minds for themselves, to see what they're consuming, how they're consuming, why they're consuming, and perhaps change their practices as a result. But also to take feedback. We do a lot of this work with the community now, and we're getting a lot of feedback about how interested people are in learning new skills, being able to make things and also adjust and adapt things. And I think that this is something that we're thinking about doing long term. Make connections with different people, obviously, and also the ultimate for me is always reuse, remake, repair, and focus on people and place and make things relevant. Thank you very much.